fiscally responsible, financial geniuses, monetary magicians. These are things people say about drivers who switch their car insurance to Progressive and save hundreds. Because Progressive offers discounts for paying in full, owning a home, and more. Plus, you can count on their great customer service to help when you need it, so your dollar goes a long way. Visit Progressive.com to see if you could save on car insurance. Progressive Casualty Insurance Company and Affiliates. Potential savings will vary. Not available in all states or situations.
This episode is brought to you by Stouffer's. Here comes three-time juggling champion Natalia Rogers. She's juggling law school, her TA job. Oh, narrowly catches the laundry. What's that fourth ball? Parents unexpectedly showed up at dinner time? Is that too much for Natalia? Not with Stouffer's Chicken Alfredo and its mouth-watering mix of Asiago, Romano, and Parmesan. When you're juggling four things at once and the clock strikes dinner, think Stouffer's.
What does it take to build something sustainable in a world that's constantly shifting beneath your feet?
I started podcasting at the dawn of podcasting. The end of 2004 was when I made my first RSS feed. Maybe podcasting had existed for 8 months.
Jesse Thorn has been doing that for 2 decades. He built Maximum Fun from scratch, starting with a college radio show, growing it into a beloved podcast network, and pioneering a listener-supported model long before Patreon or Substack were household names.
And the Patreons and Kickstarters made that into a much more transactional operation, where they're like, do I get exclusive what stuff? How much of the show do you put behind the paywall and not let me listen to unless I give you money? And our premise was always, we want to put as much as possible out for free. And the stuff that's behind the paywall is almost nothing. And it's just like a way of saying like, hey, thanks.
The creative economy is broken, but some people are still making it work. We're here to find out how. I'm Anna Marie Cox.
And I'm Open Mike Eagle. And this is Past Due. Jesse.
Yes, sir.
Well, first of all, thanks for being here. Finally, the tables have turned. I think you've interviewed me a couple of times now. I've never gotten to Uno reverse it like this yet. But we, as a podcast that is about how creators navigate this economy, we start all of our interviews with a very important question that you can answer with as much transparency as you like. And that is, when is the last time you were concerned about covering your monthly expenses?
It's probably about 10 years ago. I've had savings for about 10 years. There have been times when my income has not covered my expenses. Mm-hmm. Especially I had a lot of really intense family health expenses early in the pandemic, but not directly pandemic related, but nobody had COVID, but where definitely my outlays outstripped my income. But yeah, I'm 44. It's probably since my mid 30s. Like in my mid 30s was when things finally kind of stabilized.
What was that stabilizing element that came?
My friends, the McElroy brothers, became very popular podcasters. There was also, I mean, it by no means was just that, but like that was the difference for Maximum Fun, the podcast network that I started, between like this constant struggle of just trying to keep 3 people employed, mm-hmm. And pay the rent, to like, how are we going to have enough customer service to help members when their credit card expires or whatever, those kinds of things. These days, I do well from at least 2 of my 3 shows, my own self. And I have savings from when I was the owner of Max Fun. But yeah, that was a huge, there was like this point where it went from the shows in Max Fun, there being a few, moderately successful shows, to like the McElroys, who host the Adventure Zone, and my brother and me, among other shows, like hit the Tumblr like rocket to viral success. And that really like stabilized the finances of Max Fun. Now, that said, that doesn't mean that I wasn't constantly terrified that they would like change their minds about being my friends and colleagues. And I'd have to lay off 4 people out of the 6-person staff or whatever. But yeah, in the years since, we've been able to like broaden the base, stabilize, etc. But that was like the big difference.
Tell us a little bit about Max Fun. I'm sure that our listeners who are podcast consumers, I listen to several Max Fun shows myself, and actually had my credit card expire and got like personal emails about, please change your credit card number, which, that's classy, I will say.
Thank you. Yeah, classy / inefficient. That's how we do it.
Okay, sure. I bet it's inefficient, but wow. Like to have an actual person tell me, okay, your $5 a month isn't coming in. Could you please help? But I'm also pretty sure people don't know exactly how it works. And you started it, you had this vision for it. So tell us more about where it came from and what the ideals were that propelled you.
I started podcasting at the dawn of podcasting. 2004, the end of 2004 was when I made my first RSS feed, which, maybe podcasting had existed for 8 months at that point. And it was initially just a way, I had a community radio show, which is now my NPR show, Bullseye. And I was just like, if I could get 100 people to listen via this weird thing that is, I guess, replacing the real audio files that were on my website, then it seems worth it, right? And in 2007, which is 2 or 3 years later, I moved to Los Angeles from San Francisco, where I grew up. And the main reason was that my wife was going to go to law school at Loyola. But the other reason was because I figured if I'm going to try and be in show business, I can't do it from San Francisco. And the byproduct of that was I decided not to have a job anymore. So I had been working part-time as a receptionist at a nonprofit called the Trust for Public Land. I had been unemployed, desperately unemployed before that. And I had kind of just been living off of, they paid me a good salary. I mean, they paid me like $17 an hour or something, which 20 years ago was no joke, but for a doofus like me. But I was living off, that 20 or 25 hours a week of $17 an hour. And when we moved to LA, it was like Teresa, my now wife, was going to take out law school loans to go to law school. And I just thought, I got to be able to figure out how to come up with $1,500 a month. That was kind of my goal, was $1,500 a month. And we lived in a 1-bedroom apartment in Koreatown here in LA. And I was doing the show out of Koreatown. And I had I think it was 3 $1,000 freelance checks over 3 months when I moved from my friends in this sketch group called Casper Hauser. They had taken the marketing budget from a book that they had, and they convinced them to let the publisher pay me to make a podcast out of their sketches to promote the book. And I was like, I got to come up with $1,500. And that was where Maximum Fun came from. It was like, okay, I don't have enough audience to sell ads. Nobody knows what a podcast is. I'm going to put up a PayPal button on my website. Please give me money. Then I was like, well, if I'm going to put up a PayPal button, I should put up a PayPal subscription button so I don't have to ask people for money over and over. And my dad had been an organizer and a fundraising consultant. And so I knew some things about fundraising. And I just thought more shows was better than fewer shows for building a connection with people. And right around then, I started making Jordan Jesse Go with Jordan Morris, which show I still make, and Jordan had been my co-host in college. And I added a show to the network called Stop Podcasting Yourself. That's still part of Maximum Fun, still one of my favorite podcasts in the world. And I was just like, this can be a sort of fundraising infrastructure. And that's where the network came from. It was like, there's no Patreon, ads are hopeless. There's no advertising economy in podcasts. But there's got to be some way for me to come up with $1,500 a month. The idea was half the rent, which our rent was $1,200, plus $100 a month for health insurance, because I only had the kind where you just like get hit by a bus and they, they take everything you have, but they don't kill you. And then $300 for food, and then it was like $200 for whatever I wanted, or $100 for whatever I wanted.
So you started this in 2004 when there was no infrastructure and people didn't know what a podcast was. And since then, you've seen all that change, including an entire advertising boom and bust.
Multiple. Yeah.
Have you been consistently listener supported the entire time? Was it a conscious decision never to enter the ad economy with Maximum Fun? Yeah,
we have always, it started with kind of like, because the central show of the network, even though I don't know that it was ever the most popular show of the network, but the central show of the network was my now NPR show Bullseye. And I wanted to try and follow public radio underwriting standards. And so we always have been limited to 2 ad spots in any show. Never have done pre-roll ads, only mid-roll ads. We don't want the ads to be in the way of the show. Like I know that it's like a, 2007 idea of how the internet should work, but like, I still don't like pre-roll ads. Like I think if you click on the video, you should get to watch the video. And so we always limited it to 2 ads per show. In the early days, no one wanted to buy more than 2 ads per show. So it was a pretty easy decision. But in later days, certainly there have been many times when we could have sold more. I think ultimately, Bill Moyers was on Fresh Air and in maybe 15 years ago, and they reran it when he passed away a couple of years ago. And one of the things he said about public media was, you have to ask yourself, like, as an audience member, like, do you want to be a listener or a customer? Right? Like, do you want to, and from the creator's perspective, for us, it was like, do I want to be making a product catalog, or do I want to be making a show that people want? And like, when you're supported by advertising, ultimately you are a way to sell products. That's your business model, is a way to sell products. And I don't think advertising shouldn't exist. I'm not there. But I do think that as a creator, I would much rather work for the audience than work for advertisers, or have it be my job to convince my audience to buy stuff. So it was always no more than 2 ads. It was always any host or creator can turn down any ad. Very early on, when ads first came in, I turned down some ads that would have made a big difference in my life for the Navy, because my father was a Navy veteran who had spent his life as a peace activist. And so, yeah, it was always like, given the choice, I would rather work for the audience. The other advantage of it is it's just way more stable. So, the ad bust that you're probably referring to, Mike, was, I guess 3 years ago now, something like that.
Right.
It was catastrophic, and a lot of companies went out of business. And it definitely hurt Max Fun. I mean, it's the closest we've ever come to having to lay people off, but we didn't. And the reason is that ultimately for the network, I don't know, 65 or something % of our revenue comes from direct audience support. And for shows, it's even higher. It just feels a lot better to work for the audience, even though you have to ask for money. Like, asking for money is no fun. Like, nobody likes it. You know, I wish that I could do it without asking for money. And I get hate mail about asking for money, but I ultimately would rather be asking the audience for money directly than asking, you know, having to worry about, can I pay my mortgage based on the marketing budget of MeUndies.
And how does MaxFun work as a network? I mean, do you take a cut, or do you share a kitty? Like, what is the actual like financial underpinning there? It's
kind of like a public radio network. It's kind of like a record label, hopefully in a benevolent way. We essentially, you know, there are shows that MaxFun produces in partnership with the creators often. Like, for example, my shows I own, or Jordan and I own, or John Hodgman and I own, and MaxFun produces them. And essentially, MaxFun handles the business side of the operation. So fundraising and ad sales and marketing and blah, 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 blah. And for so doing, they get a cut of those revenue streams. And it's like a system that I set up because it was kind of how I wanted it to work as a creator. Like, the whole thing, the whole company is from my perspective as a creator, right? Like, it was never built to scale, unfortunately, for my 401k. It was always built to service creators. You know, otherwise I would have made Patreon and I would be very rich right now. But yeah, it's like basically, there's a cut that comes from advertising sales. There's a cut that comes from membership money. There's a cut that comes from merchandise. We don't take anything from touring. And in many cases, the shows are completely independently produced. Like My Brother and Me, the McElroys produced that. They cut it themselves, et cetera, et cetera. In some cases, we're providing producers and basically recouping the cost of the producer's time. We're usually not charging for stuff like studio time and stuff, or office space, those kinds of things. It's mostly just salaries of somebody that works on the show, if an employee of MaxFun works on the show.
Quick heads up, there's no bonus segment this week.
But if you enjoyed this conversation with Jesse Thorn, we hope you'll consider supporting us on Patreon anyway.
That's right. We got tons of great bonus content from past episodes, extended interviews, behind the scenes stories. But more than that, your support helps us keep making this show week after week.
In the spirit of listener-supported media, just like what Jesse built with MaxFun, if Past Due means something to you, because it means a lot to us, head to patreon.com/pastdue and chip in. Thanks for being here.
This episode is brought to you by Factor.
Cold days, big goals, absolutely zero interest in cooking?
Factor makes healthy eating easy with fully prepared meals designed by dietitians and crafted by chefs.
No planning, no grocery math, no what did I buy this ingredient for?
I love that Factor has quality, functional ingredients, including lean proteins, colorful veggies, whole food ingredients, and healthy fats.
And there's so much variety. Over 100 rotating meals every week, including the new Muscle Pro meals, if you're doing strength stuff.
And they support your diet, whether it's high protein meals, Mediterranean, whole ingredients, healthy fats, or more. Plus, there are no refined sugars or artificial sweeteners.
I've looked for something like this for a long time, and Factor really is the best.
It's good food that tastes great and is ready in about 2 minutes, always fresh, never frozen, no prep, and no stress.
Head to factormeals.com/pastdue50off. That's 50 off.
And use code PASTDUE50OFF to get 50% off and free breakfast for a year.
Eat like a pro this month with Factor. New New subscribers only, varies by plan, 1 free breakfast item per box for 1 year while subscription is active.
Are you looking to reclaim your health? Tune into the Real Foodology podcast hosted by me, Courtney Swan, integrative nutritionist and real food activist. I'm on a mission to transform our food system by challenging the corrupt practices that undermine our health and replace them with choices that genuinely support our well-being. Listen to Real Foodology podcast on your favorite podcast app. New episodes every Tuesday.
You are celebrating the 25th anniversary of your show, Bullseye, that you started in college.
Thank you, and thank you for how excited you clearly are about it.
I mean, I'm just trying to match your energy.
Mike,
that's how
always
Mike
sounds
talks
like
about
that.
everything.
That is like
That's
how he
Mike
talks about. That's how he talks about like his kids. That's how he talks about like I mean, I'm trying to think of other stuff that I assume
I
he
just
gets
won
excited
the lottery.
I'd love to be able to say that.
Yeah.
I'd love to practice it because it was true.
Sometimes you can hear a smile in his voice, but excitement.
Yeah. I've met Mike.
I reserve my excitement for the vocal booth. I'll probably say, but it's interesting that it's on NPR, and I would just love to, if you could trace the arc of that, how it goes from college. It sounds like for some of the time it's on Maximum Fun and it's on NPR. How have those two lines intersected, Maximum Fun and Bullseye?
Yeah, well, it's never stopped being part of Maximum Fun. And it being part of Maximum Fun was part of my agreement with Public Radio International, the first distributor that it had, and it's part of my agreement with National Public Radio. NPR, I think they only want us to call it NPR. Basically, it goes like this, Mike. None of these steps felt inevitable or even imaginable along the way. So it starts, I'm 19 at UC Santa Cruz, and I go on a tour of the campus radio station. I realize that when you're making a radio show on the mixing board, up makes it louder and down makes it quieter. And I was
very important things to know.
I was like, I can handle that, right? Like it was a time, like I'm elder millennial, like I could not afford video. And in the film department, you didn't get a camera until your senior year for one semester. So like radio was within my means. You could cut audio on the computer that I had in my dorm room. You know, it's the same thing as like, you know, Mike knows from music. Like I at that same time, I was on a message board called OK Player, and like Little Brother were getting together and posting their music. And they were making it in Fruity Loops, a $20 shareware program, right? And I was making stuff on Cool Edit, which was a $20 shareware program. It's now part of Adobe Creative Suite and costs $500 or whatever.
Did you have the cracked one that everybody had?
No, I paid the $20. I paid my $20.
I did a little piracy with Cool Edit.
But it was like within my means, right? So we did 5 years on college radio. My co-host Jordan was a year younger than me, so he stuck around with me. And I, when I graduated, like went home to San Francisco and was just driving over the mountain once a week in my mom's car to do my college radio show. It was very pathetic. And then Jordan graduated, and I was like, uh-oh. But around that time, the then NPR station in Santa Cruz, KUSP, somebody on their board heard the show on KZSE and sent me a note and said, would you be interested in putting it on KUSP? I said yes. They did not pay me, but they had a board operator. And that meant that I didn't have to drive to Santa Cruz to be there to press play on the CD of the show. I could just send them the CD. At the time, they did not know how to download files. So I had to mail them a CD of each week's show that I burned on my computer in my apartment in San Francisco. But that allowed me to sell the car that I had at the time, buy a microphone, probably the one I'm talking into right now, and buy a mixing board and buy a phone machine. That was the big one, a telephone hybrid, the machine that connects your mixing board to the phone lines. That was an expensive piece of equipment. I bought it used and it still cost like $800 or something.
Wow.
And that was more money than I could ever imagine having, except if I sold my car, which I sold for $1,600. So that was like step one. I was on this small NPR station, but I was not with any distributors or anything. Around the dawn of podcasting, I got an email from WNYC in New York, a guy named Chris Bannon at WNYC, who was a program director there. And he said, would you be interested? I've heard your show on the web. Would you be interested in putting together like a 5-episode best of series? And they paid me. They paid me like, I can't remember, $300 each or something. But I was over the moon. But then that ended.
That was your
I got an email
that month.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. And I got an email from Public Radio International. They said, if we were interested in your show, would you be interested? Because I didn't even know, I had no idea how to even reach a public radio network. Like truly, like I didn't know anyone that worked in public radio. Like I didn't, like there was the guy that had emailed me at KUSP, but like I had never been to KUSP. Like I didn't know anything. I was trying to get a job in radio and failing. I eventually managed to get that receptionist job. And I was like, yeah, of course. And then I didn't hear from them for like 9 months. And I was like, oh, I guess they decided not to or whatever. Then they sent me this, like, they said, we are interested. Here's a projected revenue schedule. And the way that PRI worked, and this is still basically the same way that my deal with NPR works, is they are able to charge stations for shows, which independent public radio shows basically can't. Stations just won't pay. But PRI and NPR and American Public Media were able to charge stations for shows. And they sent me this like chart, year 1 through year 5 of this 5-year contract I was signing. And it was adding stations each year, right? And the last year, year 5, I was projected to gross $30,000. And I was like, on the one hand, I was like, well, I'd take a $30,000 income right now. On the other hand, I was like, not sure how I'm going to hold out for 5 years. And because I had a job and I was making the show, an hour-long weekly public radio show by myself, right? And so, but no one else was offering me anything, so I signed up. And I think it didn't quite go that well. I think that that revenue schedule was optimistic. Mm-hmm. But I stuck with PRI and eventually started getting money from podcasting, from the stuff that we talked about. And I was so annoyed with PRI. They're so nice. They don't really exist anymore, but the folks that I worked with were so nice. But like, I just was penniless. Like I was not like, eventually I hired my friend from college for like $300 a month to edit the show. So that I could do a little more other stuff. But, I was still practically making the show by myself and not making enough to eat if it weren't for my wife's law school loans. So eventually I called a guy at NPR that I had met and I was like, hey, would you be interested? It had not occurred to me this is like 6 or 7 years into my relationship with PRI or something. It had not occurred to me at that point to shop around. But I called NPR. He said he was interested. And, the great advantage of NPR as a show that's distributed by NPR, so I still make my show, they just are the ones that send it to radio stations, is their NPR. So, they're also great people, but so were the people at PRI. But now we can call guests and say, hi, we're calling from NPR's show Bullseye. And we can, NPR is better positioned to charge stations for shows and blah, 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 blah. But always within that was me making it clear to PRI and NPR, if I can't raise money outside of this, I will not be able to do the show because I won't be able to afford to pay anyone, including me. So for many years, I didn't fundraise on the podcast for Bullseye or The Sound of Young America, but I did do it on social media and stuff. And we were able to like get enough money together to make the show. It's still like barely breaks even, even if you presume that I barely get paid.
On that NPR piece.
Yeah. Am I terrified?
Yeah, that was what I was going to say. Does it feel like the stabilizing factor that it used to? I'm guessing no. But it's NPR also having to turn to the same kinds of fundraising methods that podcasts were, right? Like it's now becoming more like Max Fun than NPR.
NPR has some advantages that give it some stability. It has a significant endowment. It does, like, I don't want to present that as though it's like covering the cost of NPR or anything, but like it helps. And it has this network of stations that people actually listen to and give money to. So those stations do still pay dues to NPR and pay for shows to be part of NPR. So there's some stability there. Like they still haven't started slashing and burning at NPR. For small stations, in particular, it's a really dire situation. It remains to be seen what will happen with network programming, because it's possible that some of those small stations will have to lay off people locally and just like get down to what's the least staff we can have to keep the broadcast signal going. And so they'll have to be carrying more national shows for that reason. One of the people they have to fire is their one reporter, and one of the people they have to fire is their one local host, That's a possibility. We'll see. But I think a lot of stations may even go under. And I'm definitely hearing from NPR that they're going to have to cut the rates that they charge for my show for a lot of stations, especially the smaller ones, which means that I will, because I get paid a portion of what they collect, will be taking a big hit too. And we'll see how that works out. NPR has been, over the last 10 years since I've been with them, trying to struggle with how do they deal with the fact that they are a network of stations, but they are also an independent entity. And the stations are reliant on NPR programming for fundraising. But when people are getting NPR programming directly from NPR rather than through the stations, that's a problem for the stations. If NPR is fundraising directly for itself, that's a problem for the stations, because it might be money that otherwise would have gone to the stations. So NPR has been trying to figure out, through what they're now calling the NPR network, they're really emphasizing that lately, like how to convey to people who are giving money how to support public radio, So yeah, it's a really intense, scary time. But like the truth is that, like, for Bullseye, I've always been somewhat of a failure on public radio. So I've always had to figure out how to rely on other stuff.
I mean, it seems successful to also have the opportunity to fail for a really long time. That seems...
Yeah, well, I would count that as a success. If you can keep up failure for a long time, like, isn't that the same as success?
That's possible. I sometimes wonder if... I definitely wonder sometimes, am I still doing this show because I'm too scared to not do this show? It also, like, I'm very motivated to the show. Like, I don't want to, I'm not trying to say like, please, BuzzFeed article headline, Thorn says hates NPR show. But like, when you've been doing the same thing for 25 years, since I've been an adult, I'm like, am I doing this out of habit? I'm not sure. But I do know, like, one of the things, like, my parents divorced when I was very young, very acrimoniously. And I really joined the middle class in my late teens, mid to late teens. So like my mom went to graduate school when I was, I think like 8 to 10 or 9 to 11, something like that. She got her first full-time job as a junior college professor when I was 17. And my dad got his service-related disability certified when I was like 14 or 15, something like that. And those things stabilized the finances of my parents' houses. Like neither of my parents, my mom had a career making $47,000 a year as a junior college professor, but like that was much more stable than her previous careers. And, my dad was getting his $30,000 in disability payment, but that was still much more stable than being an independent fundraising consultant on anti-war issues. So I knew always how, and I also never went hungry.
Mm-hmm.
Like I never was, our finances were never the kind of unstable. My mom would borrow money from people sometimes, but like it wasn't the lights are getting turned out and it wasn't, we don't have enough to eat. So I knew how little money I needed myself to be stable financially. Like that was the $1,500 a month. I was like, if I hadn't had kids, I could have lived on the inflation adjusted equivalent of that forever. I knew because that's what my life was like until I was 17. I didn't go hungry. It was always expected that I would do something I wanted to do. And it was never a goal to make a bunch of money. But it was a goal, like to be clear, it also wasn't the like thing where like, I'm an artist. It doesn't matter if I make money. I knew that it was my responsibility to make the money I needed in order to make the stuff that I wanted to make. But I also never was like, I'm going to get rich doing this or whatever. I knew that like, and that is comforting in many ways. Like to know, like I lived on 18 grand a year before, I can do it again. Even now I'm like, probably I could still get a board op job. Like there's still radio stations. I know how to work the emergency alert system. I could get by.
You mentioned something that's really important, I think, to the kind of people who listen to this show. Although I think normies like this show too. I think normies like the backstage pass to what it's like to be a creator. But I know our colleagues in the creator world care about, which is that piece of if I wasn't doing this for myself, I wouldn't be able to do the kind of work that I want to do. Right. Can you think of it as an example? Like what's something that you've done that you've been like, you know what, this is kind of nuts, but I'm going to do it because I don't have to answer to anybody. It may not work out, but this is my thing. I'm going to do what the fuck I want.
Yeah. I mean, number one, my working for myself did not come out of purity. It came out of I couldn't get a job. I tried really hard to get a job many times and failed constantly. I never even got an interview in radio. I had briefly an unpaid internship on a morning show, and I had a little internship on a public radio show in San Francisco, neither of which had any hope of turning into a job. And the morning show was giving me migraines every day because I had to wake up at 4. So I tried to get a job and failed. This was everything I did was a desperation move. Like all my independence, like partly it's only child, but partly it's just I failed to get a job. But I think that is true now. I mean, I love that I'm in charge of my stuff. The first thing that comes to mind, frankly, is, I started Bullseye 25 years ago, and there was essentially no comedy on the radio anywhere other than a few Howard Sterns And that's maybe even like a little different from what I would define as comedy. I mean, like Howard Stern, I'm not putting down Howard Stern, a total genius, but like slightly different kind of thing. There was no comedy on the radio. And there was almost no thoughtful stuff about hip hop on the radio. There was some on, like, my friend Jay Smooth had a show on the Pacifica station in New York. I grew up listening to the Wake Up Show on the radio in San Francisco with Sway and Tech. But on public radio, there was essentially no coverage of hip hop. And when it showed up, it was anthropological and paternalistic baloney. And thankfully that's changed since, but those were the things that I cared most about in the world culturally. Like, I also loved, Pedro Almodovar or whatever, but like my favorite things were the Larry Sanders Show and, Quantum Projects. So, I just put like, Terry Gross wasn't interviewing Devin the Dude, and Robert Siegel wasn't interviewing David Cross. And even now, NPR in particular, in the world of public radio, has made some huge headway in covering hip hop. The dude that runs Tiny Desk Concert is a hip hop first guy. He didn't use the original guy was a very, what you imagine public radio people liking. Really nice dude, knew a lot about music, but like a very like singer-songwritery kind of. And the guy's name's Bobby that runs Tiny Desk Concert now is like a hip hop guy. Like E40, when he came on my show, asked me, "Can you get me on Tiny Desk Concert?" And like, I used to have to explain what NPR was to any guest from hip hop.
Wow.
And he wanted that. And then he did it. He got on. They booked E40. Like when I saw like Larry June and La Russell, like Bay Area rappers that are not even that nationally famous on Tiny Desk Concert, I'm like, oh, we won. And the audience of NPR music has always been much younger, much more ethnically diverse than the NPR radio audience, right? So there's been huge steps forward. I think both the actual program code switch and the folks who have come from that show to other parts of NPR made a huge impact on NPR. Yeah. The way it sounds, like in 2025, you can turn on NPR, you can hear a host or an announcer talking, and you're like, oh, that's a Black person. Oh, that's a Southerner. There are these kinds of sounds of people talking that you didn't hear before, right?
That's a person below the age of like 40.
Yeah, exactly. And that's like, for real, no shade to all of the Robert Siegels of the world who are total heroes to me. And NPR has always actually been a pretty ethnically diverse organization staff-wise. But all that stuff having been said, it was, I guess, last year, right? Was the 50th, so quote unquote 50th anniversary of hip hop, I think. Maybe it was 2 years ago.
I think it's 2 years, yeah.
And I sat down with one of my producers, Richard, is also a big hip hop fan. And I was like, Richard, let's just do a fucking rap month with only rappers. Because anytime we run hip hop interviews on the show, we get like 3 emails from elderly white people complaining. And I'm just like, and it always like bumps down the numbers on the podcast and shit. Cause a lot of our podcast audience only wants to hear interviews with They Might Be Giants, which they're always welcome on my show. The nicest guys in the world, man.
Jesse, comedy, hip hop, They Might Be Giants, really in my intersection here, man.
Yeah. I know. Really. Maybe they'll tolerate Open Mike Eagle then. But like, I was like, let's just book Jeezy on the show and see what happens. Like we had Jeezy on the show. We had Rakim on the show. We had a whole month where we only interviewed rappers. I was like, somebody try and get MC Light's phone number. Like, let's go. Let's do this. Get Saba in here. I can't remember who everybody was, but we did a month of just rappers. And like, even now, even though like, for example, Tanya Mosley, who's the new co-host of Fresh Air, is conversant in hip hop. Like, I don't think any other NPR show would do a month of just rappers. And we were like, let's just do it. I'm the white guy, he's the rapper. This month on Bullseye.
As an old white person, next time you do that, I'm definitely writing a letter to NPR and being like, as an old white person, I appreciate being introduced.
The old email swerve. I love it. Speaking of emails, though, one thing that's been in my head since you mentioned it earlier was that when you do fundraising, you still occasionally get hate mail about it from people who are upset that you are asking for money. I am really curious about the psychology of that, and what kind of things you end up having to say to people that successfully convert them from a normal sort of consumer where they expect everything to be free or ad supported to, I now feel more compelled to support this show with my money.
And I would add one further complication to that, Mike, which is in 2025, so much of the creator economy has moved onto the payment processing platform Patreon, the tech finance company Patreon.
Yeah.
That a significant portion of the audience views supporting artists as a transactional action. The biggest negative blowback that I get, and there's this whole community of people that hate me personally, but the biggest negative blowback that I get is more, how dare they sell me not enough for the money that they're charging me?
Yep. Yeah.
People who will not buy, like when I started Maximum Fun 15, 20 years ago, there was the internet wants to be free, but there was not pushback on the question of, if I give this to you for free and you think it's worthwhile, will you give me some money? Some people would say no to that. Most people always will say no to that. But there was no group of people that were like, give you money to support your work? No, what do I get out of it? And the Patreons and Kickstarters made that into a much more transactional operation, where they're like, do I get exclusive what stuff? How much of the show do you put behind the paywall and not let me listen to unless I give you money? And our premise was always, we want to put as much as possible out for free. And the stuff that's behind the paywall is almost nothing. And it's just like a way of saying like, hey, thanks, right? It's not, you're not buying it. You're buying the show that you could also get for free. So that is the complicating factor, is that the last decade or so, that math has really changed for some people. In terms of asking for money and making that ask work, like that's stuff that I learned from my dad, who, as I said, was he worked for many years with his best friend, a guy named Ed Roberts, who was the sort of spearhead of the independent living movement. And he worked as an organizer with Veterans for Peace and Vietnam Veterans Against the War for many years. And he had an NGO called the Jai Foundation that did community-led development work in Laos and India, among other places. And the way you ask for money is, first of all, you create something that is really valuable to people. And you create a relationship with people that has meaning for them in their lives, right? Like the example that I often think of is Harley Davidson. But another good example could be your favorite sports team. Like I love the San Francisco Giants, right? It is not just like a thing I like watching. It is a thing about me. right? That kind of depth of connection is always what we're shooting for, that it has like real meaning in people's lives. Not that it's the only thing that has meaning in people's lives or the only thing they are, but that it is like a part of them. We want to create something that has that level of meaning to people. When you have something that has that level of meaning to people, you can say to them very frankly, this is how we make this thing. Will you be part of that? And if they are part of it, if it is part of them, it makes sense for them to say yes to that, especially if you're, because ultimately, like, we're talking about, like our highest levels of support, we're talking about $20 a month, right? Mm-hmm. Like, there's a few people that give us $100 and $200 a month because they're the sweetest human beings on earth, but and or they, maybe they work in blood diamonds and they want to wash their hands. But like, mostly we're talking about $5, $10, $20 a month. That's money that if you've got your needs met, you got $20 a month, right? So it's not about the amount of money. It's about the difference between no and yes. And if you want to have the yes, you got to make something that means something to people, that they feel, rather than just think about or whatever. And I think to some extent, you also have to be mindful of creating something that makes their world better, where one of the goals is to make their world better. And so like Max Fun, we've never been perfect, and I don't claim to be, and we're not a nonprofit, et cetera, provisos. But like, one of our goals has always been to try and do it morally, try and leave the campsite better than when we got there. Right. And, that helps people feel like it's worth giving up some money for, that they don't have to give up. Cause like we've always been for profit. And, the main reason in the early days was just because it's really hard to run a nonprofit logistically, which I knew because of my dad, and how much of his time in his one-person nonprofit was spent just doing the stuff that you have to do to maintain a legal nonprofit. But the main reason to become a nonprofit is so that you can get giant checks. Because people that give a lot of money at once want to write it off their taxes. People that give $5 a month, they don't really care. Mm-hmm. But people who are giving $50,000 want to write it off their taxes. And I was like, well, no one in our audience has $50,000 to give us anyway. So don't worry about that. You know what I mean? But yeah, it's like, you got to make something that really means something to people is the ultimate answer. And then you have to actually ask. Like, you can't not ask for real. Like, you actually have to ask, and it will bother some people, and you just have to deal with that.
One thing you're reminding me of in your talk about this, made me think, we talk about the way you talk about moving someone from a non-subscriber to a subscriber is a conversion, right? You convert somebody from not paying to paying. At my old podcast, I did an entire season on conversion experiences of the religious and ideological kind. But hearing you talk, they're related, actually.
Yeah.
Because
I believe that.
The science-backed, sociological, neuroscience even backed instruction booklet, to the extent there is one, for moving someone from one ideological position to another has to do with what we say in the 12-step programs, attraction, not promotion. That when someone is denazified, right, like de-radicalized, a lot of times what that is showing them, wouldn't you rather be a part of this community than that community? Because the ways that people get radicalized is like they're attracted to like the, time of Nazis, like they're talking to the toughness, they're attracted to the, the macho bonding that happens, right, among skinheads. But if you show them like, well, here's some, like anarchist, anti-racist skinheads, and look how much fun we have, and look like at our community, like that becomes the thing that moves them out of it. And I'm just like, the way you described like giving something of value makes me think like it's like telling people like, don't you want to be a part of this community? Right? Like, don't you feel like you'd get something out of being someone who could be the kind of person who's a Max Fun subscriber? Right? NPR has perfected that. Right? This
and
the tote bags.
Right. Tote bags. Yeah. I mean, I also think like community has always been essential to Maximum Fun and always been a guiding principle. And the truth is that has gotten much harder. And it's one of the biggest challenges going forward for Max Fun and for operations like it is as the internet is more and more mediated by social media platforms rather than the open internet. Social media platforms incentivize an antisocial way of interacting with other people. So like all the problems that we had a little bit on a message board in 2009 are times 10 on Twitter, because inflammation is the way that you draw eyeballs. Like I see so much more inflammatory stuff than I see pleasant stuff, or even stuff that I've chosen, right? And even when it's good, like even if it's a video on Reddit of a dog doing something really funny, it's still like big and inflammatory and exciting in a way that talking to a friend of yours isn't. And we've also seen like there was a time when I could get people in the Max Fun audience to hang out with each other in real life. And that has become, even as our audience is bigger, become dramatically more difficult. Like 15 years ago, I could be like, hey, I'm going to be in Chicago. Let's have a meetup. And 30 people would show up, and they wouldn't just stand in line to get my autograph. They'd sit and talk to each other. And those things are much harder in the current social media landscape. I would say like the places where you can have an advantage is like, I mean, there's like I'm pretty involved in trans rights issues because I have 2 transgender children, and like there's no way for that not to be inflammatory right now on either side, right? And it radicalizes and incentivizes and excites and binds trans rights activists just as it does people who are hateful transphobes. So in that sense, it's good. Like we're all watching Aaron in the morning and finding out what the latest threats to our children's lives are. But it also is exhausting for your soul and doesn't always produce effective action. It can, but like doesn't always. And it feeds the opposite shitty version too. So that's kind of tough and scary for me. For someone that always like, my goal was always to like have a Max Funny kind of person, which was always kind of like nice, smart, and funny, who wants to have a relationship with other people that are like that really care about that kind of stuff. It's harder and harder to bring those people together as a community, and it's easier to bring together, people who trade stories of whatever mistakes we've made and get radicalized as I hate X McElroy or whatever.
Hearing you talk about something that, again, like as someone who writes about politics, I feel like I see in a different, maybe through a slightly different prism. But when you said both sides, like there's a part of my hackles got raised, right? Because I don't like to think of my side as having like similar problems to the other side. But I think what you may be raising is an interesting way is that I think both ways, both sides of radicalization, and there are two sides to radicalization, that's the meaning of radicalization, right, are exhausting. And that a trade-off that one makes if like you kind of exist in a constant state of fight or flight is to not be able to take in a lot of new information or not to process things as critically as you might otherwise. So to me, that's a constant risk as someone who feels radicalized by what's going on right now. You know, when I'm presented with information that doesn't fall cleanly on one side or another of what I think of as my moral compass, part of me is like, I don't.
Well, I mean, I'll give you not
gonna do that one.
I'll give you an example drawn from life, as they say.
Okay.
So I got this parallel career. Obviously, I, as an NPR reporter, have no political feelings of my own. I'm perfectly transparent and beautifully objective. But I have a very long-time colleague who's the editor of my menswear website that I started. I had a menswear blog that was very popular in the time of blogs and still is getting by, called Put This On. And the editor of it is this guy named Derek Guy. And he has become...
he's amazing.
Yeah, he's the best. And he's been working with me for more than 10 years and is a wonderful guy. And he was a sociologist and has always approached the question of clothing both from an aesthetic perspective and from a social and cultural perspective that has a really deep understanding of race and identity, among other things, gender identity. And he's a really decent dude. He shared on social media a year or something like that ago, something that he had not talked about previously publicly, which is he was undocumented for much of his life. And he's a ethnically Chinese Vietnamese immigrant. And that is a big part of how he sees the world, right? And he has become an internet celebrity as the menswear guy because he is very good at memes, extraordinarily good at memes, and he's really good at pointing out this parallel part of the menswear information sphere, which is kind of like trad wives, but for blue blazers, that has led to much of the right kind of synthesizing the stuff that we were writing about on our blog 15 years ago now, out of fashion, obviously, and, wearing tight pants suits with big collar gaps that don't fit them, right? And Derek makes fun of them, and it's great. But I just signed into my Blue Sky for the first time since I created it several years ago, like yesterday. And I ran into a big conversation about me and Derek being shit libs because Derek is probably paid by landlords to advocate for housing being built because he's like a very urbanist type guy. And how I'm like an evil capitalist, right? And I'm like, on the one hand, obviously, I have no politics because I'm an objective reporter.
So fair and balanced.
But I can say, like, my father was a professional anti-war activist. That's why we only ate meat once a week when I was a kid,
Yeah.
We ate a lot of pasta because protesting things doesn't pay very well. And like, I'm from in the inner city in San Francisco, like my values are what my values are. Right. Like it's not about people seeing what our place in the world is and having a direct response to that. It's about an inability to deal with anything other than my team or a different team. Like, because I promise you that whoever called Derek a shitlib agrees with Derek on, 97% of whatever, are you a libertarian quiz you get handed on the quad in college, and so, it's really like once you're identified in that way and you're in that constant state of nervous system arousal, it's really hard to be generous with anyone.
Cortisol makes it literally harder to think, right?
I mean, I got 3 autistic children, so I know very directly what one of the experiences of having my kids, because all of their various sensitivities, which vary between them, and their expressions of autism vary, very a lot between them. But like, one thing is, I've gotten a really good sense of what happens when your nervous system floods. I am familiar with the fight or flight response. I've been run from and I have been struck in that state, So I see it, it's vivid to me before my eyes, for sure.
Well, it's been such a pleasure having you here, but now we're at the most important part of our show, where us as a platform, where our
Carpool
entire
karaoke,
disco ball comes down. We are all about discussing how creators are navigating this current economy. So it's very important for us to turn the show over to our guest at this point to let people know how they can best support you. So, Jesse, this is the time for your plugs.
Great. Thank you, Mike. Well, Bullseye is having its 25th anniversary, and we're running a bunch of special shows on the podcast. So I hope people will listen to the podcast. We're also doing our third of 3 25th anniversary shows. We did a show, when this comes out, it'll be last week in Santa Cruz, where I started it all with Adam Scott and Glenn Washington from Snap Judgment on public radio, and Boots Riley from The Coup and the brilliant filmmaker and television maker. We did a show in Los Angeles with Jason Mantzoukas and Roy Wood Jr. and Rebecca Sugar. Those will be on the podcast. And then coming up on November 15th, which is a Saturday night at the Pit in New York City, we're doing the final of those 3 25th anniversary shows. And it is a lineup, guys. We got Tony Shalhoub, we got Jad Abumrad, we got H. John Benjamin from Bob's Burgers and Archer and other things. We have Bobby Lopez and Kristen Anderson Lopez, the team behind the songs in Frozen. Bobby is literally an EGOT. They're going to be singing songs, and stand-up comedy from the great Josh Gondelman. So if anybody's in New York,
friend of mini pods,
friend of every podcast, indeed. Yeah. Oh, that I were half the podcast guest Josh Gondelman is. But if you're not in New York City, I would just say go check out Bullseye if you like in-depth conversations with artists, because we got a lot of them. Go listen to somebody that you love, Dolly Parton or Andre 3000 or Tom Hanks or Pedro Almodovar, as previously mentioned. It's in your favorite podcast apps. Go search for Bullseye. And if you just want to hear me swear and do jokes about private parts, that show's called Jordan Jesse Go.
Thanks again. It's so lovely to meet you. I know your voice very well. And as I said, I'm a Max Fun subscriber. I do feel an identity as that, like a certain type of person supports Max Fun. So
thank you.
Thank you.
I appreciate it. And Mike, thank you for being a Max Fun host for many years.
Oh yeah.
Very
feels like home over there.
We always love Mike. Yeah. And thanks for the opportunity. Cause the thing that I love, having done this for a long time, I used to do this talk called Make Your Thing, the subtitle of which was a 12-point program for absolute 1000% guaranteed success. And I want to teach people that they probably won't succeed unless they happen to get lucky, but that is not a reason not to make things. And it's not a reason not to try and make money from the things that they're making. That like they're making things is rewarding, and it's okay to try and make money when you make things. And it's also okay to work as a receptionist and make $100 a month from the thing that you make, if you like making the thing.
I think that's about covers all our bases. That's been perfectly summed up. Thank you, Jesse. That was awesome.
Thank you, guys. I really appreciate you thinking of me.
Anna, it's time for our plugs. So what you got going on?
I am doing a National Novel Writing Month writing group. It doesn't have to be a novel. Also, funny story, there was an official NaNoWriMo group, and it is now no longer. But you know what? It's its own thing. If you want to write every day for a month, you can just do that. And you can do that with me. Go to my website, AnnaMarieCox.com, and there's a thing right at the top. It is free. I'll be there from 7 to 8 Central, and it's just it's a community thing, Mike. It's just if you, like me, have trouble just doing your daily pages, we'll do them together.
That's good.
And that's what I got going right now. Usual stuff. I have another podcast called Space the Nation, and I am a columnist at the New Republic. Mike, it's going to be funny for a year.
Oh, gosh.
It's going to be funny for a year.
You're going to do it again?
I'm going to do it again. I heard you have something out.
You heard I had? I can't believe you heard that. I can't believe you heard that damn dirty lie about me having an album out that's been out for 4 months now. That's not a secret to anyone who's paying attention to me, but I am still continuing to promote it because the lifeline that social media provides a musical release is not its true lifeline. It is not bound by how quickly the news media turns over. So once again, my album Neighborhood Gods Unlimited is out now, and I just put out a video for a song called Relentless Hands and Feet this morning, so you can check that out over on YouTube. I think I'm done. By the time this comes out, I'm officially done touring for the calendar year. I can sit my ass down somewhere for once, and that's a good feeling. But there's t-shirts over at if you go to MikeEagle.net, you can get a link to my merch. So there's places there where you can buy shirts, you can buy vinyl, you can buy audio cassettes, anything you like.
And you personally mail them out?
Too much. I do that too much, yes. Personally, very personally. You might get a follicle of my hair in your package. I didn't do that on purpose.
Well, they can clone you. You better be careful.
Don't give them any ideas.
All right. We will talk at y'all next week.
We sure will.
Past Due is hosted by Anna Marie Cox and Open Mike Eagle. It's produced by Andrew Steven. You can find more at pastduepodcast.com. Help support the show by joining our Patreon at patreon.com/pastdue. Another way to help is by subscribing, sharing the show, and leaving us a review. Thanks for listening.
Stop doom scrolling. Start decoding the tech, rewiring your week and your world. The Interface is the BBC's fiercely informed, fast, and funny take on how technology is changing everything.
Hosted by journalists Tom Germain, Karen Howe, and Nikki Wolf, each episode unpacks week by week the unfolding story of how technology is shaping all our futures. No guests, no jargon, just 3 sharp voices debating the tech news stories that matter. Whether they shook a government, broke the internet, or quietly tipped the balance of power.
As TikTok shifts geopolitics, Trump drives digital shockwaves, Elon Musk expands his space internet empire, and AI reroutes the routines of everyday life. The trio asks, what world are the tech titans building for us? And do we want to live in it?
Find The Interface from the BBC wherever you get your podcasts.
Not all darkness is dangerous. Sometimes it's the doorway to becoming whole. On the brand new podcast, The Shadow Sessions, hosted by me, Hibab Al-Faqih, a psychologist and trauma expert, We shed light on the hidden corners of the human experience. Through raw, unfiltered conversations from the edge of healing, the Shadow Sessions invites you to do the deeper work that leads to real change. Follow the Shadow Sessions wherever you're listening now.